Broadcasting live in geosynchronous orbit with eccentricity and non-specific inclination, The Situation Room, with your hosts Rocci, John, and Scotty.
A disposition that allows them to separate themselves from the moralistic implications, but also the humanity implications of what is taking place.
What do you have to do with the charge of double standard policy, that other countries are then going to, in turn, torture our soldiers and people if they know that we do it? Well, here's the question. Now, my immediate response to that, all due respect over there in the chat room, my immediate response is the only reason we did it is because greater things have happened to us, and it's time to put a stop to it. Isn't there a time, and Rocci, I've used this illustration before, if in your neighborhood you saw somebody attacking your family and attacking the people around you, and they're getting away with it, when do you draw the line and say, enough is enough? Harsh words aren't going to work. I need to go, not for the sake of revenge, but I need to go make a show of, I have greater strength than you, and I will incorporate this right now to stop you from doing what you're doing.
Me, it would personally be immediately. If innocent people are being threatened and harmed, it would be immediately.
And you can only do so much, and I'm not talking about vigilantism here.
Right.
Of course, the illustration is imperfect because we're talking about individuals in a community versus corporate entities of governments. So I think when a government has that, and people say, I hate the argument of whenever the United States gets involved in something, well, you're not the world's police force. I just want to go, yeah, we are. Because you aren't. Why is it wrong for the United States to react with greater strength to those that have hurt us and our people in order to stop it and prevent any future atrocity? But then when we do that for our allies and we step in to do it, I don't care what the hell somebody wants to example or hypothetical they want to use as being, well, we have that interest over there, so we wouldn't do it if it was that country because we don't have an interest over there. But if we have an interest here, we'll do it. Well, hell yes, of course, because we are out for the benefit of our nation. We are here to benefit our people, to protect our people, to undo the things that would wrong our people. And if we have a certain interest in a certain nation or a certain area, why not? That's a hell of a good reason to step in and say, okay, you're going to stop this because what you're doing is going to affect what affects my nation. And so you're going to stop, and we're going to be the police force on this. Or in this case, something that happened to us, yes, there was national anger. Yes, there was probably some people who just wanted vengeance. Yes, there were people that said, go. Look at all the people who criticized George Bush and entering into Afghanistan and called it Bush's war. Look at all the people in the Senate and the Congress that, oh, that's George Bush's war, years after it happened. But how many people opposed George Bush and did not vote with George Bush to go into Afghanistan or Iraq? How many people in the Senate and in the House, how many of the joint Congress opposed him? 5 people opposed him. The rest signed on. But then later, when it was politically inadvantageous to support Bush on that, then what happened? Oh, it's Bush's war, and we must stand against it. Now, that's an oversimplification of what happened, but read it, folks. Look it up. Only 5 members of Congress opposed George Bush going in. And then they all say, well, we were duped. He lied to us. But let me ask you a question. If a congressman is that godforsaken dumbass that he could be duped that easily on such a huge issue as that and does not ask the questions, he deserves to be duped. There is nobody who signed on there in Congress. When you're in Congress, you're elected because you supposedly have the intelligence to do the, I almost used the F word, to do the blanking job. And if you have the intelligence to do the job and you ran on the fact that you could do it better than anybody else, you better damn well be informed enough when you cast a vote to go to war. And then not backtrack on your word 5 years later because it's politically advantageous for you to do so. We didn't do what we did in the case of the CIA, in the case of EITs, because it was out of vengeance. We might have been angry and we might have wanted vengeance, but I think where we are better than them, and this is what Obama keeps saying and people keep parroting on the left, well, we're supposed to be better than that. Well, you know what? God damn it, we are better than that. Because while we had the feelings of vengeance and hatred, we acted out of morality. We acted out of what we knew was the right thing to do and incorporated the amount of justice, or I'm sorry, not justice, the amount of power that we needed to incorporate to show those whom we were enacting it upon that we have greater power than you are. We will visit upon you a greater power in order to stop this, and we will stop it. And that's what happened. That's my take on all of this.
But you haven't so far.
We haven't so far. And
But
you know why?
It's a long road. It's a long road.
It's a very long road, but as you and I have talked about on other occasions, what's going on right now in the Middle East, I don't think is just stoppable by simple military action or by getting somewhat involved. Oh, let us go help them. We'll advise, and we'll run a few air sorties. That ain't going to do it.
We could always send the emotional Rocci over to them.
There's that. Let me ask you, by talking, how many drunk people can you talk out of being drunk by way of reason? Answer that question for me.
None.
Can you talk a drunk person out of being drunk? Can you talk him sober by use of reason?
No.
Or do you sometimes have to trip him backwards on his ass and sit on him and cuff him to a wall and let him sober up after you've doused him with a few buckets of water to sober that dumbass up? Now, here's the question. If you've got a mindset out there, a political, religious mindset out there that is killing people on the basis of the fact that they are stuck in 7th century mentality, and we're trying to get them to act by way of reason in a 21st century mentality, is it going to work? You might have a few shining stars that might rise up and go, hey, wait a minute, maybe this is wrong. Very soon get their heads chopped off. This is what you're facing. You are facing a mentality that does not think the way we view the 21st century. Are we either too advanced or are we the backwards ones? Should we be enacting vengeance on each other? Should we be killing children? Should we go over there and find their schools and deliberately kill their children? Should we be doing that?
No.
And when we're
better.
When we have killed children, which has happened, has it been because we have deliberate orders to go kill children for not believing in the beauty of the United States? No, we have not done that. Have there been individuals that have acted badly over the course of our history? Yes. Has there been a governmental policy to do that? No. And you're going to have somebody who's going to raise their head and go, oh, well, what about this case? We happen to know. I'll bet you there are people out there. I'll bet you the government was ordering. We don't know that. We really don't. And what we know is that we do try to live as a government that is the bright, shining city on a hill. And that is the exceptionalism of the United States, I think, that people miss out on. And no offense intended, John, because I think Great Britain is right along with us in that we're pretty much in accord with the way that we treat the world. I think there's a civility, a 21st century civility that exists. But if you mess with us, we're going to mess back with you. And that is the tone that has to be taken, or you will soon lose that glorious position of being the shining city on the hill.
Well, you lose all credibility on the world stage, both politically and economically. And you will be walked over. You will lose control. And control is power, and power is everything. And there are those who are out there who will argue this, especially the liberals. And, fair dues to them. Okay, you argue away, and they will make some very valid points. But I always return to the one argument on this, and that is that at this present moment, the reality is that we're not ready for that kind of liberalism. We're not ready for that. We haven't evolved enough as a human species to contend and deal with that kind of liberalism across the board. And you only have to open your eyes and look at what's happening around the world to see that. And so unfortunately, especially now during our lifetimes and probably the lifetime of our children's children, this will continue, this type of extremism around the planet, regardless of religion and regardless of culture. Extremism is an inherent fault, or one should say an inherent equation to our current set of circumstances that we are propagating here in the West. And as long as we continue to do so, we will have extremism. But as I say, that goes hand in hand with our own evolution as a human race. And until we have evolved into a more superior force mindset, then unfortunately this will continue.
I want to get a couple of quotes out there for people. Brennan with the CIA, when people charged that these EITs produced no useful effectiveness at all, he said the cause and the effect relationship between the application of those EITs and the ultimate provision of information is unknown and unknowable. But for someone to say that there was no intelligence of any value, of any use, that came from those detainees once they were subjected to EITs, I think that lacks any foundation at all. That's his take on it. Enhanced interrogation tactics, it was useful. It was valuable. Human rights activists have called for the prosecution of all these officials that were involved in this whole CIA interrogation program, which, by the way, many of them weren't citizens of the United States and weren't even in this country when it happened. You've also got Obama that's come out and supported his words. And Brennan, they both admitted there may have been abhorrent methods that were used on terror suspects, but he largely defended the whole terror interrogation program, saying it was useful and valuable information that came out of it. And you've got to think, too, when you have 3,000 of your people killed, as somebody rightfully correct me, well, not all the 3,000 plus people killed in the Twin Towers were Americans. There were foreigners in there, too. Well, okay, yeah, there were some people in there that weren't American. But the fact that it happened to us, there is going to be an outlet. It's like what did Hirohito, it was said that he said of the Americans after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Now, this is ascribed to him. Real history says he said something like this, but it's been watered down to this statement, is that he said, I fear we've done nothing but poke a sleeping tiger. I think that's what you get when you render this kind of thing on a nation that is strong enough to take care of itself, but also moral enough to stand up for humanity. You still are going to have a backlash. Standing for human rights does not mean you do not defend yourself. It does not mean that you do not, I'm going to use the word retaliate. There is a retaliation level that would not exist if it was not provoked. On such a level as this, there was a major provocation. There was a major reaction. I think we can almost put it to bed because there's none of us here that disagree that enhanced interrogation techniques is the same thing as unmitigated torture.
No, it's not. But interesting points you've just raised there, brother. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Probably some of the most interesting conversation you've actually had to say by yourself for quite a while.
Well, that's interesting because the last show you said I made a statement that you probably was the most intelligent thing I've ever said. So I appreciate that. That's in a 1 week window. You've said I've said 2 intelligent things. That makes me feel really good.
You're on a roll.
I am.
Try and keep it up. See if you can say something intelligent next week.
I'll see what I can do. So chalk it up to the Situation Room. We gave you what you needed to know on this.
And
thank
you for that.
I do want to say that Sean in the chat room says he agrees with us personally, and he says things like this are best kept unspoken and unpublicized. I agree with him on that. He says otherwise it threatens the safety net of why we have people gathering information that's used for public safety. Definitely. And that's ultimately true.
Yes, it does. And it ultimately erodes our freedoms. Because, I mean, where do you draw the line? When you stop interrogation techniques being used upon the enemy, where do you draw the line on those freedoms? Who's to say that the enemy should not be interrogated? And to what level of interrogation? To retrieve what kind of information that will safeguard our own freedoms and that of our soldiers. There are so many questions there that need to be answered. And these questions do need to be answered and asked. I've said throughout the whole show, I'm quite an advocate for the interrogation technique. I don't mind saying that publicly.
He threatens me when he tells me secrets about Silsila. He said, now, Scotty, he says, don't share that with anyone because you know what will happen if you do. The safety of your family is at risk.
But there are also implications. And I think, as a civilized society, we sometimes do need to question ourselves, but not in this kind of manner, by naming and shaming and going down that kind of route. It should be run of the mill. It should be part and parcel of the discussion of the Houses of Representatives. It should be part and parcel of the discussion that goes on in the House of Lords and the House of Parliament. The higher echelons of our Ministry of Defences should be having these conversations and these discussions on how do we improve the interrogation technique, how do we improve the publicity of such, and how do we restrict access to the general public of such actions and so forth. All of this goes hand in hand with the reasons why this stupid woman shouldn't have been allowed to raise
Dianne Feinstein. Yeah.
Yep, her. She shouldn't have been allowed to raise this investigation in the first place. And I bet it's probably cost the best. I mean, you can imagine how many millions of dollars she's probably spent on this.
Not to mention what she has done to the safety of operatives that work for the CIA and the United States around the world.
Exactly.
So there you go. And folks, we're going to go out to break. We've only got a few minutes of this show left, but let's go out to a quick break. And let's see if we can lighten the tone a little bit when we come back. You're listening to Scotty, that's me, and John,
that's me,
and Rocky. And we're here with the Situation Room. We'll be right back after these breaks.